What happened? Neura. Oh my gosh. You all, how did this happen? I'm sitting here live on the, am I live here on this screen? No. I thought, why did my screen change? That's kind of embarrassing. Can you all hear me? How did that happen, you all? I tell you what, that gave me a hot flash. I'm sitting here thinking, can you all hear me? That's so embarrassing. I don't even know what I was doing. How long have I been on here? Oh, I haven't been on here long at all. Hello, everyone. Now, look, I just now got the screen that says, look at this. YouTube's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. It happens within 1.5 minutes of live streaming this. That is what I get, you all. That's kind of embarrassing. Oh my gosh, you all, I'm sitting here thinking I'm hot. I want to get a drink of water. I do want to get a drink of water. I really do. I'm gonna put you all right. Get that off of there, you all. I'm gonna put this on. You can stare at Mr. Musk for one moment. Please let me just get a I need to get me a glass of ice water because I am hot up here, you all. I really am. I'll be right back. I'm almost back. Just wait one moment. Whew. Gina, let's get this going. All right. Oh my goodness, you all. I think I am back. That's good. Hello. Yes, Mr. Musk. Sometimes I like looking at pictures of him where he looks kind of nice. Sometimes he looks kind of strange, but you know what? His Neuralink is a really wild and way out there. It really is. Oh my goodness, you all. I want to show you all just a part of his opening thing about the Neurolink, if you all up for it, because it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to let you sit through the whole entire thing. Whoo! You thought the floor won't? Yes, you are. Arg. We don't know about that, but I'm going to push this over to Mr. Musk, and his Neurolink is what I'm going to do. Yes, hello. Hello, wherever you are in any part of the world. Hello from my heart to yours. Thank you for being here. We're going to look at Mr. Musk's, his interview is what we're going to do, if that is all right. Because let me just push this screen on him. I think we've got Mr. Musk. No, get off of there, Mr. Trump. Okay.
So we're going to actually go quite into depth on what we're doing, why we're doing, how we're doing it. And I'm just incredibly impressed with the caliber of talent at Neuralink. And in fact, the main reason for doing this presentation is recruiting. So we really want to have the best talent in the world come and work at Neuralink. Anyone that's interested in trying to solve this problem, and that's actually the primary purpose for this presentation. So.
What are you doing, Mr. Musk?
Okay. So the why of Neuralink, just to go over it, is I think it's important for us to address brain-related diseases. Everyone, if you survive cancer and heart disease, the odds are that you will have some brain-related disorder. So it'll be like Alzheimer's or dementia. And if you don't, friends and family will for sure. And I think unless we have some sort of brain-machine interface that can solve brain ailments of all kinds, whether it's an accident or congenital or any kind of brain-related disorder, or a spinal disorder, if you know somebody who's broken their neck or broken their spine, we can solve that with a chip. And this is something that I think most people don't quite understand yet. And we're going to go over in detail how this is possible. But I think there's an incredible amount we can do to solve brain disorders, damage, and all this will occur actually, I think, quite slowly. So I do want to emphasize that it's not going to be like suddenly Neuralink will have this incredible neural lace and start taking over people's brains. Okay. It will take a long time. So you'll see it coming. So getting FDA approval for implantable or devices of any kind is quite difficult, and this will be a slow process where we will gradually increase the issues that we solve until ultimately we can do a full brain-machine interface, meaning that we can ultimately, yeah, this is going to sound pretty weird, but achieve a sort of symbiosis with artificial intelligence. So, but this is not a mandatory thing. This is a thing that you can choose to have if you want. And this is something I think that's going to be really important at a civilization level scale. So, and I've said a lot about AI over the years, but I think even in a benign AI scenario, we will be left behind. And so, and hopefully it is a benign scenario, but I think with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, I think we can actually go along for the ride. And we can effectively have the option of merging with AI. I think this is extremely important. And if you think about your limbic system and your cortex, your limbic system is kind of your primal needs and wants, and it's like where a lot of your emotions are coming from. And then the cortex is like the thinking, planning part of your brain. And I haven't met anyone who wants to get rid of either the cortex or the limbic system. So clearly they work together well. Even though your cortex is, in principle, far smarter than your limbic system, everybody wants to keep the limbic system and their cortex. So hopefully we can have a tertiary layer, which is the kind of a digital superintelligence layer. And in fact, you already have this layer. So it's your phone and your laptop. And the constraint is just how well you interface, the input and output speed. So the output speed is especially slow since most people are typing with thumbs these days. So you have a very slow output speed. Your input speed is much faster due to vision. But the thing that will ultimately constrain our ability to be symbiotic with AI is bandwidth. So in the limit, after solving a bunch of brain-related diseases, there is the existential, it's mitigation of the existential threat of AI, or, yeah, this is the point of it. So creating a well-aligned future, that's the idea.
Composed of nearly 100 billion cells called neurons. Neurons come in many complex shapes, but generally they have a dendritic arbor, a cell body called a soma, and an axon. The neurons of your brain connect to form a large network through axon-dendrite junctions called synapses. At these connection points, neurons communicate with each other using chemical signals called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are released from the end of an axon in response to an electrical spike called an action potential. When a cell receives enough of the right kind of neurotransmitter input, a chain reaction is triggered that causes an action potential to fire, and the neuron to in turn relay messages to its own downstream synapses. Action potentials produce an electric field that spreads from the neuron and can be detected by placing electrodes nearby, allowing recording of the information represented by a neuron.
We thought we'd play that twice. It's so good you have to play it twice. Well, I think like a lot of people in the audience, there's a wide range of knowledge about neurons. I mean, some people view the brain as like this incredibly mystical thing that you cannot interface with the brain, and then some people are aware of deep brain stimulation, such as occurs for Parkinson's patients. So trying to address the broad range of understanding. I mean, neurons, essentially, there's that whole idea, what if we were just a brain in a vat? This is often posed by philosophers, except we are a brain in a vat, and that vat is our skull. Everything that you perceive, feel, hear, think, it's all action potentials. It's all it's neural spikes. And it feels so real. It feels very real. But these are all impulses from neurons, what's called a spike. And our goal is to record from and stimulate spikes in neurons and do so in a way that is orders of magnitude more than anything that's been done to date, and safe and good enough that you can, it's not like a major operation. It's sort of equivalent to sort of a LASIK type of thing. So where you can sort of sit down, machine does this thing, and you can walk away within a few hours. And that's it. And you're not even in a hospital. So like there's basically, in terms of key points that are worth taking away, the system that we designed in version 1 is capable of on the order of 10,000 electrodes. So each chip, which is 4 by 4 millimeters, is capable of 1,000 electrodes, or has 1,000 electrodes. And we think doing up to 10 is feasible. So this is in contrast to the best FDA-approved system, which is like a Parkinson's deep brain stimulation thing, which would have on the order of 10 electrodes. So the system, even in version 1 that we're going to unveil today, is capable of 1,000 times more electrodes than the best system out there. And they're all read and write. So this is really quite, I mean, for something to be 1,000 times more than what is publicly approved is quite a big difference. And this will get better with subsequent versions. Now this slide may seem a little generic Because like everything's got robots, electronics, and algorithms at this point, but not threads. So the I feel like I'm in transcendence. There's actually, I was in transcendence. So there's very tiny threads that are about a tenth, roughly, of the cross-sectional area of a human hair. So they're extremely tiny threads. In fact, the threads that we have, like I said, even in version 1, are about the same size as a neuron. So if you're going to go stick something in your brain, you want it to not be giant, you want it to be tiny, and to be approximately on par with the things that are already there, the neurons. So this is about the size of a neuron, each thread. And then you really need this to be done with a robot because it's very tiny and it needs to be very precise. So you don't want to pierce a blood vessel. So so each thread, the robot looks sort of basically through a microscope and inserts each electrode specifically, bypassing any vasculature, any kind of like blood vessel, and making sure that it can be inserted without causing trauma or minimal trauma. Yeah, it's not zero, but you won't notice it. That's the important part. You won't yeah, you won't feel a thing. Yeah, anyways, obviously algorithms. So just to give you a sense of scale, this is how tiny the threads are. That is not even a big finger, that is a small finger. So these threads are just like I said, way smaller than a hair, and there's 1,000 of them. And this is what the robot looks like. It's sort of quite a complex device, but it all comes down to a very tiny point. So we want to just like you see the robot on the left, and then the what looks like the needles for insertion next to a penny, but in fact the actual needle that gets inserted is way tinier. It's that little tiny thing at where the arrow is pointing. That's actually the size of the needle. It's about 24 microns in diameter. Extremely small. It's so small you can't really even see it in the picture with the penny. And then this is your rain on uranium. No, that's not really. That's agar. So you can get a sense for the robot doing the electrode insertion. That's a very zoomed in view. So they're all very tiny, and the robot is very selectively applying them very delicately. And then this is what the chip looks like. So action potentials. So each one of those represents one electrode. So there would be up to 10,000 of these lines. Yeah. So. I guess, it's always difficult to say. There's going to be there's a lot more in this presentation. So in terms of things that I think are important to bear in mind, this I think has a very good purpose, which is to cure important diseases, and ultimately to help secure humanity's future as a civilization relative to AI. The threads are very tiny, and there's a lot of them, and they're very carefully placed. And the operation on a per chip basis, it involves just a 2 millimeter incision, which is dilated to 8 millimeters, and then the chip is placed through that, and then it goes back to being 2 millimeters, and you can basically glue it shut. You don't even need a stitch. So, and then the interface to the chip is wireless. So you have no wires poking out of your head. Very, very important. So it's basically Bluetooth to your phone. Because we'll have to watch the App Store updates for that one. Make sure we don't have a driver issue. Updating. But the key is like this is something that is going to be not stressful. Our goal is not stressful to put in. Should work well, hopefully. We'll check it out very carefully before it becomes obviously FDA approved. And it's wireless. So this I think has tremendous potential, and we hope to have this aspirationally in a human patient before the end of next year. So this is not far. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is the main purpose of this presentation is recruiting, and we need very talented people in all these areas. So it's a lot of very talented people are needed to make this ultimately successful. And then, speaking of talented people, let me hand it over to Max. Yeah.
Thank you. I need the clicker. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Max Hodak. I'm the president of Neuralink. I remember a couple years ago when we started talking about the idea of Neuralink and that there might be a company and whether this was even a good idea. I remember my first reaction was that I wasn't sure that this actually was a good idea, that the technology was there yet. And I think Elon has this incredible optimism where he'll pierce through these imagined constraints and show you that really a lot more is possible than you really think is today. And you have to be very careful telling him that something's impossible. It better be limited by a law of physics or you're going to end up looking stupid. And so I've wanted to build a neural interface has really been like a central goal of my life for basically as long as I can remember. I think like we talk about AI being potentially the last invention that we have. I think that a high bandwidth BMI might be like really the first invention in many ways of like the next chapter of us. It's just really like, as Elon alluded to earlier, everything about your experience, your thoughts, your memories, it's all in your brain and represented in the firing statistics of action potentials. So, all right, so just what is a BMI? And we'll go through this fairly quickly, I think. So you start with hopefully a brain and a machine. But the machine is just a stand-in for the outside world. It could be another brain, it could be software, it could be a robotic arm. But you want to receive energy from that world and impart through the senses like vision and audition and impart energy back into the world through things like motor control. And that language that they use to communicate, putting aside the interface hardware for a second, it's very important to understand what that is, because people ask, like, oh, can I talk to my dog, or can I do these things? But it's important to understand what that language is. And that language, in the most general sense, is information. To a first approximation, everything is information. But we just consider here the information represented in neurons. And so consider two like toy neurons. One, so these lines are imagined action potentials. And so imagine a neuron that fires very regularly, like a metronome. Like, this doesn't tell us anything. There's no information conveyed in this signal. We don't learn anything from it. On the opposite end of the spectrum, imagine a neuron that fires completely randomly. This also doesn't tell us anything. This also doesn't carry any information. Now, we know that these two degenerate cases are not what neurons do, because if you fit a model from recorded neural activity to behavior of things like a cursor of a patient or a subject that's implanted, and you correlate these, then you can build a graph that looks like this. And this is a figure from a classic paper in this field, from like the academic heritage of this field from 2003. I think that actually some of the authors of this paper are in the audience today. And you can see it's the x-axis is number of neurons, and the r is the goodness of fit. And you can see that as you add neurons, the quality of the model improves. This tells us that neurons and their spike trains carry information about things. Here it asymptotes fairly quickly. That's because what they were fitting here was just 2D cursor control, which has simple dynamics. And if you have tasks that are more complicated, then you need more neurons. So the classic definition of information is a difference that makes a difference. It's just some piece of information or knowledge that tells you something. It's like a very abstract concept, but it's such, like information theory is such a deep rabbit hole. If you haven't seen it before, the original paper, Mathematical Theory of Communication, is like, it's very readable. I highly recommend it. You'll start seeing information everywhere. It will totally change the way you view the world because the world is information, as we've talked about before. And understanding information also gets this question of, well, why do you have to have an implantable device? Why don't you have EEG or a wearable or an optical thing? And the answer, of course, is like, well, these are different information carriers, and what information are they carrying? And we know that, like, if you open a back issue of the Journal of Neuroscience and you want to understand how some species of bird encodes sound localization or something, you'll find a discussion of spikes. And we, as far as we know, everything that we care about is found in the statistics of spikes. So that's what we focus on. There are other things like fMRI or EEG. These are different information carriers carrying different information, which we believe is impoverished relative to spikes. I think that's the scientific consensus. And so the question for all these different things is, well, what information is found in your carrier? We focus on spikes. That means we have to be inside the brain because there's no ceiling that we're aware of on that with respect to that, like, grand vision of your perception, your thoughts, everything, like motor output, re-embodying lost limbs. And so why does that mean that you have to be inside the brain? So you want spikes. Well, people have studied, if you take a neuron and you put an electrode on that specific neuron, so you have a ground truth electrical potential of that one neuron, and then you place an extracellular electrode nearby, which is what our electrodes in the Utah array and other people are like. We're not in the cell, we're near the cells. And then you measure how far away from a neuron can you be when you know what the ground truth spiking activity is, can you no longer see the spikes? And it turns out that the answer is about 60 microns, which is like 0.06. It's very small. It's a lot less than a millimeter. So you have to be firmly under the skull. Like, there's no wearable that is going to get you spikes. This is a physics constraint as far as we're aware. And so now I just want to talk about briefly that Neuralink didn't come out of nowhere. There's a long academic heritage of research here. The cochlear implant has reached millions of patients since the 50s for deaf patients. Over 100,000 patients have received deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's and essential tremor and dystonia, and now other indications. And about 20 patients have received the Utah array, which is a little 100 electrode rigid metal silicon device. And even though it has very few channels, they've been able to do some really cool stuff with it. There's videos on YouTube of brain gate patients doing things like controlling tablet computers or even texting each other through Utah arrays just from the small number of electrodes. And so many of the people on the team at Neuralink came from this academic work. I got my start working in a lab at Duke University studying how mappings between brain and like the screen space change. So if you make it so that the joystick goes, like the cursor goes sideways when you push forward instead of up, like how does the brain change that representation? So the point is that there are lots of people that have been looking at this problem from lots of angles for decades, and we're in the greatest sense building on the shoulders of giants here. And so the question is, why not use one of those devices? Why not use a Utah array or a deep brain stimulator implanted pulse generator? And in the Utah array case, the rigid sharp metal electrodes produce a fairly strong immune response. And this doesn't end up hurting the patient, but it does mean that you lose the ability to record single spikes over some period of time, usually between 1 and a couple years. There's also a big percutaneous connector through the scalp. So you need to plug in big external electronics, and you're never really confident that the risk of infection is gone for the duration that you have the implant. Deep brain stimulators solve a very different type of problem. They are very effective for some Parkinson's patients, but they have only a couple electrodes, and they're really geared towards injecting large amounts of current, not recording single spikes. So they're really a very different, the DBS is really just a very different type of platform for a very different type of problem. So we had to go back to the drawing board and start over to build something that met the goals that Elon laid out for us. We knew, as Elon mentioned, that whatever we built, we wanted it to be completely wireless. We didn't want any connectors or wires coming through the skin. It had to be something that would last for a long period of time, not something that you'd have to take out at 2, 3, or 4 years in. It had to have practical bandwidth. So we talk about high bandwidth or ultra high bandwidth. Like, what matters is that for the task that you're after, there's practical bandwidth that allows you to effectively do that thing, whether that's cursor control or typing or robotic arm or maybe in the future vision. And it has to be usable at home. It can't be something that you go into a clinic at the hospital for 2 hours a week and under tight supervision of technicians plug you into the amplifiers and turn it on. It has to be something that you can live with. And so 2.5 years ago, we were nowhere close to any of that. This is a photo of some of the prototypes that we've gone through over that time. So we started on the far left. That's an entirely passive board that has 64 electrodes on it and connects to connectors that go to big external amplifiers. And then we added integrated electronics with our first custom chip. That's also 64 channels. And then there was a big leap to the device that Elon showed a photo of earlier. That has 3,072 electrodes in a fully implantable package with just a USB-C port coming out. And then we took a step back in channel count because remember we have to optimize safety, longevity, and bandwidth all together. And so in order to optimize some of those other things, we moved to an easier to manufacture system that has 1536 channels and a USB-C port. And those last two are the focus of the paper that we released today. And so we've learned a lot from these. We've recorded a lot of data through these. Like these are actually used every day at Neuralink to record neural data and work with it. And they taught us a lot about the architecture that we think was the basis for our first human product that we're calling N1. And the central component of that is the N1 sensor. It's a little hermetic package. When it's fully assembled, this is missing an outer mold. It's into an 8 millimeter diameter, 4 millimeter tall cylinder. And each of these has 1024 electrodes, and we can stim and record through every one of those channels. Opening it up a little bit, you can see there's the thin film, which has the threads that Elon talked about, which is the wisp going off to the side. There's a hermetic substrate, and then that gets welded later to a package that goes over top, and that's mated to our custom electronics. And we'll go into more detail. We'll have the technical leaders that work on each of these talk about these in more detail over the rest of this presentation. So yeah, I mean, this is just not to belabor the point. I know that Elon really hammered this in, but these things are very, very small. They're not. You can't manipulate these. This is one photo. This is not two photos joined together, and you really can't manipulate these with your hand. That part at the top is just a backing material that's surgical packaging. They're peeled off. The threads are peeled off that one at a time by the robot to place into the brain. And we had to build a surgical robot. And the first impetus for this is just you have to place these threads. You can't manipulate these threads. You need a robot. And then that grew into understanding where the blood vessels are and imaging into the tissue, and the surface of the brain moves because you're breathing and you have a heartbeat, and there's lots of complexity of dealing with this incredibly high entropy substrate. And it's not all offloaded to the robot. The robot's under the supervision of a human neurosurgeon who lays out where the threads are placed, but it would not be, the surgery is not possible without the robot. And so the N1 implant, we can place, as Elon mentioned, many of these, possibly up to 10. In one hemisphere, for our first patients, we're looking at four sensors, 3 in motor areas and 1 in a somatosensory area, which are connected via very small wires tunneled under the scalp to an inductive coil behind the ear. And that connects wirelessly through the skin to a wearable device that we call the Link, which contains a Bluetooth radio and a battery. And this is, importantly, the only battery and radio in the implant. So if you take this off, the implant shuts off. And if there's software upgrades or security issues, it's much easier to upgrade the firmware on the pod than it is to try and change the implant. It'll be controlled through an iPhone app. You won't have to go to a doctor's office and have them have an exotic programmer to configure it. And the first thing that you'll have to do is learn to use it. Like imagine if you've never had arms, and then suddenly you have an arm, and you have to pick up a glass on the table. It's like not a cognitive task. You just like how do you can't think your way through that. And so it's kind of a trippy experience at the beginning where like patients, at first it just kind of wanders around, and then they figure out how to break the symmetry and they learn how to control it. And that's like it's a long process. It's like learning to touch, type, or play piano. And so for the first product, we're really focusing on 3 distinct types of control. The first is giving patients the ability to control their mobile device, because we heard from over and over again from patient groups that if you have to have a caretaker around to press buttons for you, what's the point? You might as well have them do the thing. You have to get self-sufficient using the devices on your own. And then redirect the output from your phone to a keyboard or a mouse on a normal computer. It'll just show up as as a Bluetooth mouse or a Bluetooth keyboard, like any keyboard or mouse that you can use on any computer. And as Elon mentioned, this is a forward-looking statement. There's a whole FDA process we have to go through. We haven't done that yet. This is like, these are aspirations. But we are working as hard as we can towards our first in-human clinical study next year. And again, these are plans, but the primary indication for that will be complete paralysis by upper cervical spinal cord injury. And we're expecting that those patients will get 4 1024 channel sensors, one each in primary motor cortex, supplementary motor area, and dorsal premotor cortex, which are 2 motor planning areas, and closed loop feedback into primary somatosensory cortex, which is like when you type or walk or pick up a pen, those aren't visually guided movements. Your body has all these senses of where it is in space and pressure and temperature and lots of other feedback. And we think for really high fluent control, you have to provide that back to the brain for the synthetic effectors also. And of course, fully wireless and able to use it at home. We think that there's a huge difference between something that you get to use 2 hours a week at the hospital versus something that you're living with every day and your brain is adapting to as much as the device is adapting to your brain. And so to bring up the other colleagues, this team is like, I'm incredibly lucky to get to work with this team. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on, I think that decoupling implantation from the electrodes is incredibly important. The reason that you have these issues where things like these like tungsten microwires get rejected is they're stiff and they're stiff and sharp and they tear the brain, and they have to be because they have to get into the brain. And so if you can decouple the process of getting it into the brain from what is left there, where it can be much softer and have material properties like the brain and maybe be coated in things that help the brain recognize it as itself, that's really important. And then the thin film polymer leads, the threads themselves, are really cool material science, and we'll go into more detail on that. And then we'll also talk more about the chips, and then a little bit more on just the neuroscience of how information is represented in firing statistics in your brain. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Matthew Mcdougall.
Thanks, Max. I'm Dr. Matthew Mcdougall. I'm head neurosurgeon at Neuralink. When I'm not at Neuralink, I'm a brain and spine surgeon here in San Francisco at CPMC, California Pacific Medical Center. Before that, I was at Stanford, where I worked in labs that implanted and designed advanced brain-computer interfaces. I originally became a neurosurgeon because I wanted to help people live happier, healthier, longer lives. I've been humbled in practice by how powerless we are to treat many of the most debilitating neurologic diseases. People afflicted with spinal cord injury, schizophrenia, autism, and a host of other neurologic conditions have far too few options. I work with Neuralink because we, for the first time in history, have the potential to solve some of these problems. Before we get to how we get the device in, we have to talk about our guiding principle at Neuralink. It's safety. Everything we do at Neuralink is filtered through the question, will this make me more likely to want to get one? Will it make me more likely to recommend this to my family and friends? This approach impacts every design decision we make. So while for the immediate future, Neuralink's devices will only be intended for patients with serious, unmet medical needs, our design philosophy is that this should be safe enough that it can be an elective procedure. So what have we done to try to make it safe? For starters, we've created very small threads. They displace a lot less tissue than the traditional methods. In my regular practice today, I routinely implant large, deep brain stimulator electrodes into the brains of my patients. They're big enough to have about a 1 in 100 chance of causing a significant hemorrhage. They displace and disrupt enough brain tissue that you can often see neurologic consequences just from placing the wire. We can do better than that. Neuralink's threads are so thin that they're difficult to see with the naked eye. They're much smaller than the width of a human hair. They're small enough that a human surgeon can't actually implant them without help. So we created help. Neuralink developed a tool that we're extremely proud of, the Robotic Inserter. Inspired by designs conceived of in labs here in the Bay at UCSF and Berkeley, we developed this robot that can rapidly and precisely insert hundreds of individual threads representing thousands of distinct electrodes into the cortex in less than an hour. This tool allows a surgeon to aim between the blood vessels that cover the surface of the brain with micron scale precision. The region of the brain shown in this video represents only a few millimeters of surface of the brain. As you can see, the brain's surface moves with the heartbeat and breathing. The robot tracks and adjusts for this movement. Using this tool, we can greatly reduce the risk of harming cortical vessels and causing bleeding. Here, the robot is selecting individual electrode threads and placing them into the brain in the pre-planned location with remarkable accuracy and repeatability. Using this system, we've been able to rapidly place thousands of electrodes into the cortex without causing noticeable bleeding. We also have an in-house histology team that examines brain tissue to help us choose electrode profiles and materials to help us minimize tissue damage. When you think of traditional neurosurgery, you probably think of something very invasive. Traditional surgery on the brain isn't something that patients ever look forward to or are excited about, except in the most dire circumstances. Usually a clamp is attached to the skull to keep it rigidly immobilized to the operating table. We often shave all or most of the patient's hair. Patients can end up with large visible scars. At Neuralink, we want to create an entirely different patient experience, something more like LASIK. No scars, no big scars, no hospital stays, no short procedures, no hospital stays, very short procedures, and of course, in the end, you get to keep all your hair. We even want this to be possible under conscious sedation. That means you can get rid of the complexity and the risk of general anesthesia, as well as many of the unpleasant side effects, nausea, sore throat from a breathing tube. To be absolutely clear, our first clinical trial patients are going to receive an experience much more like traditional neurosurgery. But our aim is to simplify the procedure, down to the injection of local anesthetic, a very small opening in the skin, a painless opening in the skull below, quick and precise placement of threads into the cortex, and then we fill that hole in the skull with the sensor, allowing the scalp to be closed up over it. Behind the ear, we'll make a small incision to insert the coil. We will tunnel tiny wires under the scalp to connect the sensors to the coil. That's the process. I believe that Neuralink is going to be able to provide us in the medical community with a platform that can finally enable us to treat some of these very difficult to treat diseases, also to understand them better. I hope you find this as exciting as I find it. If you feel you might be able to help us, don't hesitate to contact us. To talk more about the technology behind all this, I'd like to introduce Vanessa Tolosa, director of our Neural Interfaces group.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Tolosa. I lead the Neural Interface group at Neuralink. Our team consists of engineers and material scientists who are responsible for making the probes that get implanted into tissue, the packaging for the electronics, and integrating these two components together. We also do all the testing and characterization of these parts. Before joining Neuralink, I led a neurotech team at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. There we worked on a wide range of neuroprosthetic technologies that were used both in the academic and clinical settings. I decided to join Neuralink because I saw an opportunity to take all of this exciting work that we were seeing in neurotech research and actually make them accessible to patients at a much faster time rate than what medical device companies have traditionally been able to do. With that in mind, at Neuralink, we set out to create a fully implantable neural interface with thousands of channels that are capable of single spike resolution. This device must last a long time in the body. To do this, it must be small, flexible, and made of biocompatible materials that will minimize the brain's immune response. To protect the electronics from the caustic environment of the body, it must have airtight packaging, also known as hermetic packaging. The device must also be able to both record
Yeah, these can be these can all be solved with an implantable hearing, feeling, pain. These are all electrical signals sent by neurons to your brain. And if you can correct these signals, you can solve everything from memory loss, hearing loss, blindness, paralysis, depression, insomnia, extreme pain, seizures, anxiety, addiction, strokes, brain damage. These can all be solved with an implantable Neuralink. This is an extremely fundamental thing, and I think a lot of people don't quite understand that. The neurons are like wiring, and you kind of need an electronic thing to solve an electronic problem. So current medical research, we'll just go through what is the state of the art in medical research, and then what's the state of the art in what consumers or people in general can get. So the current medical research has shown that you can read neurons in a human's brain. So there's something called the Utah array, which has about 100 channels per array. But it's like, kind of like it's a bed of rigid spikes that's literally inserted with an air hammer. So, you know, that's slightly discomforting, I think. And there's wires and a box on your head, and so it's some infection risk. And obviously, it will look pretty weird if you walk around with boxes on your head. And in order to use it, you have to have an expert medical professional there, and it's only been done in a few dozen people. So, but it is served as an important. This is a high energy pig. All right, Gertrude, thanks for coming out. So what the beeps you're hearing are real-time signals from the Neuralink in Gertrude's head. So this Neuralink connects to neurons that are in her snout. So whenever she snuffles around and touches something with her snout, that sends out neural spikes, which are detected here. And so on the screen, you can see each of the spikes from the 1,024 electrodes. And then if she snuffles around, touches her snout in the ground, or you kind of feed her some food, pigs love food, then you can see the neurons will fire much more than when you're not touching the snout. And that's what's making the beeping sound. All right, cool. So as you can see, we have a healthy and happy pig, initially shy, but obviously high energy and you know, kind of loving life. And she's had the implant for 2 months. So this is a healthy and happy pig with an implant that is 2 months old and working well. Yeah. All right, cool. And then we actually have, I hope this works, so we said, well, what if we do 2 Neuralink implants? And we've been able to do dual Neuralink implants in, actually, I think 3 pigs at this point, and we have a couple of them here. And we've been able to show that you can actually have multiple Neuralinks implanted, and again, healthy and happy and indistinguishable from a normal pig. So, so it's possible to have multiple links in your head and have them all be sending out signals and be working well. All right. Phew. All right, so we just showed you a demonstration of reading brain activity. And let's see, probably see that. As I was saying, each of those dots represents a neural spike. And the blue chart at the bottom is showing an accumulation of neural spikes in that region. So in terms of additional brain reading activity, when we have, say, one of our pigs on a treadmill, pig on a treadmill. It's a funny concept, really. And we take the readings from the neurons, and we try to predict the position of the joints. And so we have the predicted position of the joints, and then we measure the actual position of the joints. You can see that they're almost exactly aligned. So we're able, with a wireless neural implant, to actually predict the position of all of the limbs in the pig's body with very high accuracy. Now, in terms of writing to the brain or stimulating neurons, we also need precise control of the electric field in space and time. We need a wide range of current for different brain regions. Some regions require delicate stimulation, some require a lot of current, and you want obviously no harm to the brain over time. And the way part of the way we analyze the stimulating neurons is with a 2-photon microscopy. I always have trouble pronouncing that, microscopy. And it's very impressive technology. You can actually literally see in real time how the neurons are firing. So the red sort of things are the neurons. The red sort of flashing things are the neurons firing, or I should say the electrodes firing. So the red things are electrodes firing, and then the green are the neuron bodies responding to the current from the electrode. So you can see them lighting up different brain regions. And then by carefully controlling the electric field, you can actually have one electrode influence possibly 1,000 or 10,000 neurons. So although you might only have 1,000 electrodes implanted, you could be influencing millions of neurons. And this is just a similar chart showing stimulation at different power levels. So, like I said, for the initial device, it's read-write in every channel with about 1,024 channels, all-day battery life, recharges overnight, has quite a long range. So you can have the range being to your phone, I should say. That's kind of an important thing. This would connect to your phone, and actually the application would be on your phone. And it would be communicating by essentially Bluetooth low energy to the device in your head. That's why I say in a lot of ways it is like a Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires. So, and then, like I said, you would not be able to see the device at all. You would look completely normal and just have a small scar under your hair. And we're making good progress towards clinical studies. I'm excited to announce that we received a breakthrough device designation from the FDA in July, thanks to the hard work of the Neuralink team. So I want to be clear, we're working closely with the FDA, and we'll be extremely rigorous. In fact, we will significantly exceed the minimum FDA guidelines for safety. We will make this as safe as possible. Just as with Tesla, while it is legally possible to ship a 1-star car, at Tesla, the only cars we make are 5 stars in every category. So we actually maximize safety, and we'll take the same approach here at Neuralink. And then to emphasize again, what the goal of this presentation is recruiting. We want people who are great at solving problems to join the company and help us complete this device, take care of the animals, write the software, create the chips, and productionize everything. So we need robotics engineers. I think we also especially need people who have worked on and shipped products. So if you've like shipped a smartwatch or a phone or any kind of complex electronics or complex device or advanced medical devices, we'd love for you to contact us and consider working here. So, and a very important point to emphasize is that you do not need to have prior experience on brains. So a lot of people think, well, I couldn't possibly work in Neuralink because I don't know anything about how brains work. And that's okay, you can learn, but we need software engineering, we need mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, like I said, chip design, robotics, and all the things that a company needs to work. So please send in your resume. Actually, it's not just engineering, obviously everything at Neuralink. So now let's actually move to questions. So we've piled questions for that.
So let me put this right here. I'm actually going to, I'm going to do it to just me. I'm actually going to stop this part of the video. Do I got this turned on, you all? Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm going to stop that part of the video because I think we've watched enough of Mr. Musk. I think you get the idea of what he wants to mass produce, and he does mean mass produce because they want to be able to chip millions, billions. He said billions in the question and answer thing. They want to be able to chip billions of people is what they want to do, and they got to have the force. They want to have around 1 million people. Well, he said he'd like to have 10,000 people in his company right now, the Neuralink, because there's only like 100 people. So they got to beef it up. Can I turn something up a little bit? So they got to beef it up. Oh, I've turned it up. They got to beef it up. The production, so they can roll it out. And the Neuralink, it does remind me of the Borg, just like somebody said here, because you had to go in to stand in that thing. We are Borg, we are many. It will give elites a backdoor to someone's mind. Yeah, they said you can store your memories in the question and answer. You can store your memories from your brain or whatever, and you can download them. You can download your memories to someone else, they said, and or a robot. That's the good thing, they said. You can relive your memories. So this is big time futuristic. It is. Yeah. So I'm sure you'll have a choice one day. You will. You'll have a choice. You can either get it or not. But it will be hooked up to like the Matrix. You know, you've seen all these movies about the Matrix and all that kind of stuff. You have. So with that being said, I'm going to go. I do not like showing long videos like that. I don't, you all. Because it's a long time to sit there. And let's face it, our attention span with the technology is only like around 2 minutes and 30 seconds nowadays. That's about all it is. And to sit here 57 minutes, that's a long time to sit here and listen. We are Legion. Ooh, that don't sound good. Yeah. No, I don't want to relive my memories either. But there is good that can come from this technology. People can walk again. They can see again. But then it can be used, if it fell in the wrong hands, if a super AI got control, one single super AI got control, we're in trouble, he said. Yeah. Alicia, yeah, it's necessary. It's informative. I won't do very many of these for that very reason. So with that being said, I'm going to let you all go. It's 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. Yes, you're also welcome, and I hope it wasn't too long. It's something that you can just sit and listen to while you do something. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Love you all, too. Thank you, moderators, for being on here. Thank you all for being on here, too. Yeah. It's our future. It's here. And I'm sure they're far more advanced than they are telling us. Yeah. That's right. Well, I'm going to go, you all, and thank you all for chatting in this. This is great. Please give this video a thumbs up. It is a big video to have to watch, but that's okay. It's all right. Somebody might want to hear it because it does play a role with what's happening now. Everything leads up to this. It does. Have a wonderful rest of your day, you all. Ooh! Okay, yeah, I didn't know what was going on, you all. You don't got to do it. You don't got to do it. You don't got to do it. Now you are aware enough to prepare yourself within your spirit and your mind of what you're going to do. You got some information. You got knowledge. Knowledge is power. You know more than most people, because I think that video was only seen by 28,000 people, and that was done back in 2019. So it didn't make its rounds. Yes, have a wonderful rest of your day. You're welcome, Apple Brooks. Thank you, Alicia Rose. Thank you, King Ahucho Mendo. Yes, thank you all, everyone. Yes. Oh, that's nice. Folly and Blue, give a people a place to commune. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be able to come on here. That's why I tried to do a live video so you all can connect. I do. It's good to connect because we got a lot of things going on in our world, and we just need that connection to feel connected, because we feel so disconnected. That's what we feel, so disconnected, but that's all right. It is. Well, I'm going to go. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Love you all, and I'm